Hi guys, all the people out there.
Yeah, we'll get started in the next few minutes. So.
Yes. Live, one out there.
Yeah, we'll get started in the next few minutes. So.
So let's gonna handle the last couple things.
Bethany, can you see how many people are watching?
Yeah, right now we have like 2, but I'm gonna post my stuff. We will get started in just a couple minutes. We're just waiting for a few more people. Okay, great. And I just posted the link to the big page again. I don't know if people had it necessarily. Hey everyone.
Hi everyone. So let's get started. So welcome to the first NSLI Applicant Q&A webinar. So my name is Aurelia and this is Bethany.
Hi, I'm Bethany Thackeray. I'm a 2018 Kaohsiung Summer alumni.
Yeah. So how this is going to work is we're going to start with each of the alumni introducing themselves, and then we're going to move on to talking about our experiences, and then we're going to conclude with the Q&A. So a bit a bit of details on the Q&A. So if you go to poll.ev.com/NSLI-webinar436, you can just type in a question there, or you can text NSLI webinar all cap, NSLI webinar 436 all caps to 22333.
And those are the same links and everything that are in the description box if you're watching on YouTube, so that way you can click it there if it's simpler, basically. So let's see. Okay, great. Do we want to get started, Aurelia, you think, with introductions?
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Aurelia Vanderveld, and I am from Spokane Valley, Washington. I am an alumni of the Bahasa Indonesian summer program, so I went to Jakarta, Indonesia, and I am happy to answer any questions about the Indonesian program specifically, or about being a vegetarian on program.
Okay, I'll go next. My name is Bethany Thackeray. I am a 2018 Chinese summer alumni, and I spent the summer in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. So not in China, but in Taiwan. And I'm happy to answer questions about really anything with the China-Taiwan experience. Also about being religious on program, because I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church. And so I can answer questions about attending church on program, because I attended church every week while I was in Kaohsiung. Okay, let's see. Let's have Aanoosh. Want to go next?
All right, hi, I'm Aanoosh. I'm from Round Rock, Texas. I'm a junior right now. I did the Korean summer program this past summer, 2018, and I'm happy to answer any questions about being in Korea as a POC or specifically as a hijabi, because, yeah, that's not a common experience. Yeah.
So Addie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I'm Addie May-Vias. I'm from Dripping Springs, Texas, right outside of Austin, and I'm an alumni of the 2018 Arabic summer program. So I was in Rabat with Ahmed East, and I can just answer questions generally about NSLI-Y, the Arabic program, and just application in general. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, Carson, if you want to go next.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. My name's Carson Collins. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm an alumni of the Hindi 2017 summer program. I spent my summer in Indore, India, in the state of Madhya Pradesh, in the middle of India. And I can answer any general questions you may have about India. I, like Bethany, am also religious. So I attended church a few times in India. So if you have any questions about that, I'm Protestant. So.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. Josephine, if you want to go next.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Josephine Holubkov. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I'm a 2016 Tajikistan alumna. So I studied Persian in Tajikistan. And I am happy to answer any questions you have about the Persian program. But also, if you are younger and applying for NSLI and you have any questions about that, I was 15 when I went to Tajikistan, so I'm happy to talk about that as well.
Thank you.
Michael, do you want to go next?
Yeah, of course. I'm Michael Adamson, and I'm an Arabic alumni from the summer of 2017, and my program was in Rabat, Morocco. I can answer questions about being LGBTQ on program, and then also Hindu on program, although that doesn't really apply as much since there aren't really any options for like practicing in Arabic-speaking countries.
Okay, great. And then Sara, if you want to go.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sara. I'm an alumna of the 2018 Russian summer program. So I was in Chisinau, Moldova with American Councils, and I'm from Wisconsin, but I'm currently a freshman in college in Massachusetts. So I can answer any questions you have about being LGBT on program, being a vegetarian on program, and also about college language placement and how it relates to NSLI-Y.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, sorry, one moment. Okay, and now we are going to get into the meat more of the program, I guess. We are going to go into alumni presentations, which basically what's going to happen is each alumni is going to take a turn and we're going to talk for a couple minutes about our specific experience on program, wherever our program location was, just all of that kind of stuff for 3 to 5 minutes. And then when all of that's done, we will go into the Q&A session. So we're going to start with Sara.
All right, there we go. So as I just said, I was in Chisinau, Moldova this past summer, and I didn't have any formal Russian experience before I went on the NSLI-Y program, besides the pre-program study materials that they gave us. So I had self-studied. So also if you have questions about having like limited language experience before going on the program, I can answer those too, and I think other people as well. But so I was in Chisinau. I lived in an apartment with a host family that was a host mother who was an older woman, maybe in her 60s or 70s, and then her 30-year-old daughter. Let's see. So in terms of daily routine, on days where we had class, I would get up at about 7 o'clock, eat breakfast with the family, and then leave at 8 o'clock because we had class at 9, and it did take about an hour to get to school on the trolley buses. And I was incredibly intimidated by the trolley buses at first. I think that's, from talking to other alumni, that's a pretty universal experience to be like incredibly intimidated by public transportation when you first arrive in your host country. But I got the hang of it eventually. After a few trolley bus adventures, got a tour of like most of Chisinau one evening. And so also, like not most, but like a lot of people on my program, and also a lot of people that I talked to about it back home, I hadn't really heard of Moldova where I was, before I got the email that was where I was going. So that was a really interesting experience, getting to know a country that not only a lot of other people didn't know much about, but that I didn't know much about. And that the people who know about it, like when the first thing I did when I got my acceptance email was I Googled where I was going. And a lot of people were saying things like, oh, it's boring, like it's the most depressing capital in Europe. There's nothing to do, like everything's terrible. And I was like, oh gosh, like what's going to happen with this? But that was, I think, a really rewarding part of the experience was getting to know this place that has sort of gotten a bit of a bad rep on like travel blogs. So one of the interesting experiences I had on program was also with my host family. My host mom was really into studying. She really wanted me to study all the time. And sometimes it did get a bit exhausting when she had me copy words out of the dictionary. A lot, but I will say that was another thing that was pretty rewarding to look back at the end of the program and say, like, okay, not only did I put in all this work in class, but I was also, and in like the immersion aspect of the program, I was also doing a lot of things at home. And I think I went from novice low to intermediate mid on the pre-program and post-program OPIs, so that must have paid off. So by the end of the program, I had a really good grasp on the Russian language. I tested into second-year Russian at school, but I also had like learned all of this amazing stuff about a country that I literally had not even crossed my mind before applying for and participating in NSLI-Y, and learn sort of the ins and outs of Chisinau and all the great places to go and all the interesting aspects of the culture. And then I guess I'll finish up and talk a bit about where I am with Russian now. So like I said, I'm in intermediate Russian at my college, which is a really interesting and fun class. Second year Russian is pretty challenging and pretty fun. And I'm planning on doing a minor in Russian and Eurasian studies. So that incorporates language, culture, and politics. So having that experience with the language is really valuable. I think that's about 5 minutes, so I'm gonna hand it over to somebody else.
Great, thank you. Okay, next up, we have Aurelia, who's going to talk about her summer in Indonesia.
Okay, yeah, so my name is Aurelia Vanderbilt, and I was in Jakarta, Indonesia with AFS / Bina Antar Budaya, which is the Indonesian version of AFS. And I actually lived in Bekasi, which is a suburb outside of Jakarta. So without traffic, it's around half an hour, but with traffic, it can be closer to an hour. So my experience with the language before program was pretty limited. I knew how to count to 10, and then I had done the pre-program language work that we had done. And then after the program, I was at an intermediate low. So while on program, Jakarta is a really big city, and we only had classes from 8 till 1. So we had a lot of time to explore the city, but also to do the activities such as volunteering and spending time with our host families. So in Indonesia, every day I would wake up at 4:30 because my host mom worked in Jakarta. So she drove me there. So I didn't really have many experiences with public transportation. And then after that, I would just wait at school till other people started showing up, and then I would be able to study during that time. So other than that, so that was my day. And then Indonesian food is something that not a lot of people know about.
Ah, sorry, just 1 second. I think Aurelia got frozen really quick. I can hold off on that really quick. While Aurelia is getting technical difficulties worked out, if we want to go to just Aanoosh really quick, and then we can have Aurelia finish up afterwards, just so that way we can keep the ball rolling.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, as I mentioned before, I was in South Korea. I was in this little city called Jeonju. It's more south in Korea, and when I first got accepted and realized I was going to Jeonju, I was like, well, what's in Jeonju? What's really cool about it is that it's both like a combination of like a modern city in Korea, and also it has a lot of traditional aspects. So while we were there, we all got to see like the traditional Korean culture and how it compares to the more modern stuff and the stuff you see on like TVs. So with my prior experience, all I could do was read the language, and even that I was really bad at it. But we got the pre-program course stuff. So yeah, I just knew that and how to read language, and that was it. And so my daily schedule would have breakfast at 7:40, usually with just my host mom, because my 3 host sisters were all in college and they worked, so I didn't see them that often. But yeah, school would start by 9, so I'd get to school by like 8:30, and then we'd all just kind of mingle. Yeah, and then classes started at 9, and we had language class for 4 hours, and then lunch, and then we would do some kind of cultural activity. So sometimes we would go out to the traditional village, or we would volunteer with the students at the school. And what was actually really funny was the school we were at was an all-boys school, and our program, or our group, was 16 girls and 4 boys. So that was kind of odd. There were a lot of boys. I was not used to that. We got a lot of attention, which was really fun. And I met a lot of like Korean students who were really cool, and I love hanging out with them, and I have really good connections with them. And I feel like that was the most valuable thing, is like I got to meet these people who I wouldn't have met otherwise. And I formed connections with them that just don't happen in like my traditional setting of where I live. And like with their help, I also like learned a lot more about myself and what I'm capable of. And yeah, I mean, it was just like a good experience with like meeting people. And for me, it was a lot about like self-discovery. So yeah. That's all I have to say for now, but if you have any more questions, let me know.
Thank you. Okay, up next, we're going to have Aurelia finish going because we got the technical difficulties worked out. Oh, sorry, one moment. I don't think we're hearing you, Aurelia. Give me just 1 sec. Okay. Let's see, sorry. Okay, then.
Can you hear me?
Aurelia, are you there, or are we?
Here.
Okay, good.
Okay, so is it working now?
Yes.
Okay, so now that we've gotten this sorted out, so yeah, my name's Aurelia, and so yeah, so in like I was talking about before, so the food in Indonesia, it's very vegetarian friendly. It's also all halal. So there were 5 Muslims on my program, 4 or 5, and they were all able to eat food normally. So, and just eat. Yeah, so the food's really good. And then my actual NSLI experience, so we didn't do as much traveling around Indonesia as some programs do, but as some of the other programs do, but we got to go to see the education systems of Indonesia and how they differ from America. And then what I would say I got out of NSLI was, so my grandpa was born in Indonesia, and that's why I chose Bahasa Indonesian as my language. And then I was able to gain a greater cultural understanding of who he was, and then also just the country and in and of itself. And the connections that I made in Indonesia, I'm still able to stay in touch with my teachers and my host family. And it's been really fun to be able to come back to Spokane and tell people about Indonesia and just more about it than just Bali, which is what most people know. So like Aanoosh said, I feel like I had a lot of self-growth on my program. I feel like going into NSLI, I was independent, but I didn't absorb as much, if that makes sense. So while on program, it was really different, just always being a listener and then constantly learning. And
So, Aurelia, you're timing out again. Well, we'll give her just 1 second to see if she reconnects, because internet has been a struggle, and if not, then we will go on to the next person and then have Aurelia finish up again, which is hard because Aurelia is constantly going in phases. Let's see. No, so, okay, so then, yeah, Aurelia's just quit out. So, Addie, if you want to go.
Yeah, so again, I'm Addie. I did the Rabat 2018 program, and I was with Ahmed East. So the cool thing with Ahmed East is they do the implementation of the academic year program with Arabic. And also we would take our classes there at Ahmed East, and that was really cool. So with my language experience, I had about like a year's worth. So I did 2 Star Talk programs. I'm an alumni of the BYU Intensive Arabic Academy. And so I did that not this past summer because obviously I was in Morocco, but I did that after I was rejected from NSLI applying the first time. And so with that, I got about a year's worth of Arabic, and that's kind of where I had my start. And with that, that affected my NSLI experience because I did have not a lot of experience, but I did have a start with the language. However, when I was there, I did learn some standard Arabic, but a lot of it was like Shami, which is the dialect of Syria and Palestine in that area. And so going to Morocco, having to learn Darija, that definitely was a bit of a kind of like learning curve. So with that, like Darija wasn't my favorite, but it definitely was cool that I got to learn that and have that connection with Moroccans in that way. And so with my daily schedule, I would start my day usually around like 7 o'clock. I'd eat breakfast by 7:30, and then usually was out the door by like 7:45 to 8. And I lived about a 10-minute taxi ride away from Ahmed East. And with that, I'd get to school around 8:10, 8:15, and then class started at 8:30. And so with that, we would have about 4 hours of class, and then we would have lunch. And then on Mondays and Wednesdays, we would have Darija for an hour and a half. And so that was just like intensive learning the dialect and all that kind of stuff. And then we had Global Citizen. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays after our Modern Standard Arabic classes, we would go and volunteer, or we would do like a cultural kind of event. And so with that, we partnered with an organization in Rabat, and we did a lot of volunteering with them. And so that was kind of like a big program of ours, is we also would have like language partners who'd come with us and volunteer with us. So I got to have that relationship with Moroccans, and my language partner ended up becoming like my best friend, and I still keep in touch with her. So that's been really cool. With my host family, I come from like a kind of big family. I have 3 siblings. And so when I moved to Rabat, I had 1 brother. And so that was kind of like an interesting dynamic, going from having a large family to a small one. And then also like another interesting thing was my host family wasn't like at night, they would go out. And so it kind of just be my roommate and I some nights. And so that was fun, being like bond with my roommate. But at the same time, like we'd go out with my host mom and go around like the Medina and shop with her and all that kind of stuff. So now coming back from NSLI-Y, I'm actually applying for the academic year, but in addition to that, I've used my Arabic. I volunteer with refugees and do ESL kind of tutoring. And so I started doing that as when I was in Morocco, one of my teachers, she worked at a organization outside of Rabat, and I went with her once to do like tutoring to students who were learning English. And I really enjoyed it. And so I found a service within the Austin area that does that kind of work with refugees. And so now I do that with that age. So I guess like the most valuable thing, I learned tons of Arabic. I remember one of the most rewarding parts of my experience was I had to do a presentation completely in Arabic one day in my class, and it ended up being 30 minutes. And it was just like me talking about like human rights, like the Moroccan government, the American government, all that kind of stuff, and reaching that like 30-minute mark. I was like, wow, I can't believe I just did that. So that was an amazing part. But then also, like Aurelia said, getting to have that independence and just like walking down the street and having that confidence that I know where I'm going and that I can get around was amazing. And I guess like I'll end with one of the like difficult things with being in Morocco and being like a female was the harassment. And I'm like, know pretty much any student you can talk to who studied abroad. That's definitely like a curve that you have, especially if you are in like Morocco or Jordan. And so with that, that definitely was a change, and you kind of learn ways to overcome it. But at the same time, like it's just annoying when you can't really do anything about it. So if anyone has questions about like having to get past the harassment, just let me know and I can give you a few tips, or like how I handled it or how other people handled it. So in all, I had a great time, and I'd love to go back, and I love everything about Morocco, and I still keep in touch with a lot of people from there. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, Aurelia, if you want to finish up, cross our fingers for no technical difficulties now. Hopefully, unless frozen again. In that case, oh, there it goes. There it goes.
Okay. So now that it's back To working? Okay, so a bit about my host family. So my host family was Christian, even though Indonesia is a Muslim majority country. So we would go to church 2, sometimes 3 times a week. Once a week we would have like church at our house. So I go to church occasionally, and it was really different going to church so often, and I really enjoyed the sense of community that I got from my Indonesian church, where I was also able to use my Indonesian to help out with the Sunday school. And with little kids, they're really blunt if you don't pronounce something right, and they're really happy to help you. So that was probably one of the most rewarding parts of my NSLI experience. And then now I use my Indonesian to stay in touch with my teachers and my host family from Indonesia, which has been a really great experience. And I hope to go back at some point. I'm applying for the YES program. And one of my teachers is planning on visiting America at some point. So yeah, the hardest part about my NSLI experience was probably the first week or so. There was a big language gap, but my host family, they were the most intense about having Indonesian and me learning Indonesian. So I had 10 words, and my host dad, every morning before I left with my host mom, he would be like, "What are your 10 words today?" And I would have to have 10 new words. So even though that was hard, and sometimes it'd be like, why do I have to do this? It was really, I feel like I give a lot of credit to my language progress to my host dad, and just to remembering those 10 words. If you're on NSLI, for me, it really helped to have a notebook that I carried around. And if there was a new word, I would just write it down, or I'd have my host mom spell it if she was with me. So, and then one last thing. So I come from a very small family. It's just my mom and I. And my host family, there were 5 people in total. My 2 host parents, my host grandma, and then I had 2 host sisters. And it was really an amazing experience just to have host sisters, to have a whole family there that would just constantly, they were always there, and they would really support me with my language growth. So yeah, it was really different, but I really enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you. And yeah.
Thank you, Aurelia. Okay, so I am next, and sorry, one sec. So a little bit about me. I am from Salt Lake, just south of Salt Lake City, Utah. And yeah, like I said, I participated in the 2018 Kaohsiung Taiwan program studying Chinese through the IRON organization. And for me, one thing that really kind of defined my NSLI experience was the fact that it was in Taiwan versus in China, because I had spent the summer before actually living just kind of on my own with a host family, not through a program, in Shanghai, China. So initially kind of going into NSLI, and after I'd gotten my acceptance to go to Kaohsiung, I was a little bit nervous because I'd never really heard anything about Taiwan. So I was like kind of scared, but then it ended up being like an amazing life-changing experience. And I fell in love with the culture in a completely different way than I could have ever imagined. And so a little bit about me, going into NSLI, I had 2 years of classroom experience plus my summer in Shanghai. And I feel like that really affected my NSLI experience, in that going in with a little bit of language experience, I was able to really build off that. And it just made, for me, at least, the program so much more enjoyable, because I could communicate with my host family to some degree going like into the program. And then it also helped me to be able to kind of build on my study skills while I was in NSLI. And then, a little bit about my daily life on NSLI. So I would wake up every morning at like 7:50 a.m., 8 a.m. because we had class starting at 9:10. But I woke up a little bit earlier than I otherwise would have had to, so I could ride the bus with my friend to the university where we were taking classes. And so I'd wake up every morning, and I would usually have breakfast with my host mom, because my host dad and my host sister were already out the door. And before I talk a little bit more about that, with my host family, so my host mom was an English professor at the university where I was taking Chinese classes with NSLI, which was really interesting because she was able to help me a lot, but then like she also challenged me not to use English like during my time in Taiwan. And so with my host family, I only spoke Mandarin, which was really, really great for my language learning abilities, because they would help me out and kind of teach me things about the language as I was using it with them. And then my host dad was a pharmacist, and he worked, and he was super, super sweet. And then I had a 6-year-old little host sister who was like the most adorable thing in the world. And coming from a really big family back in America, I'm one of 5 kids. There's 7 people in my family. It was definitely an adjustment getting used to a small family versus a big family, but I ended up enjoying it in a lot of different ways because it was good for me because I had a little bit more like one-on-one attention to be able to like talk with my host mom or my host dad and to be able to play with my host sister, which was really, really awesome. And so back to the daily life, I would go to class every morning with my friend, and we would have class from 9 in the morning till noon. And that was just like intensive big group class, which was divided into like levels based on your language level. And then I would have an hour-long lunch break from noon to 1 where we could go out to like shops around the university. NSLI gave us money and we could go buy food. And then we had small class from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. with our like TAs. And so there's like 3 of us in a class with our TA. And then we had cultural activities or language partner activities or like this language task from 2:30 to 5. So we had class with the exception of lunch basically from 9 in the morning till 5 p.m. at night, which was really intensive. And after talking to my friends who went on other NSLI programs, it's supposed to be one of the more intensive ones, the Kaohsiung program. But for me, I really enjoyed that because it helped my language level to improve like crazy. And it was a lot of hard work, and it made balancing life between my host family, my friends, and language study really difficult. But I learned a lot, and it was actually really amazing. And one little thing I want to talk about with me is religion on program. So like I said, I'm a practicing Mormon. And so while in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, I went to church. And that actually was really, really awesome because my host family I breached the question with them really early on in my NSLI experience. While we were driving to go do something on our first day, they asked me why I didn't drink tea, which is a really big deal in Taiwan. And I talked about how that's because of my religion. And then the conversation kind of naturally flowed. And they asked me if I wanted to go to church. And I said yes. And then over the course of the rest of the program, they actually supported me a lot and like helped me get to church and do all these things. And I know that not every host family is quite that open and supporting, but for me, it was like a huge blessing. And from what I know from my friends in Taiwan, their host families were also really open and welcoming to them practicing their religion and country. So I think that's really, really cool. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, go ahead, but thank you. Okay, and then next up we have Carson.
Okay, sweet. So as I mentioned before, my name is Carson. I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina, like I said, and I went to Indore, India on the Hindi summer program with AFS, the American Field Service. AFS runs programs in, I think, Russia, China, and India for the summer programs, and then I think just India and China maybe for the year programs. But besides that, I definitely had an amazing exchange experience. It was awesome. I will say that Hindi is one of the smaller NSLI programs, but even so, I found like that the smaller aspect of the program kind of made the intercultural learning aspect of my exchange even more feasible. And plus, because it was a bit smaller, I was able to grow a lot closer to the 16 individuals or other American students that I went with. So I'll talk a little bit about like daily life in India. School in India was very thorough, but it was exciting. Our teachers always kept us on our feet. It was very interactive in class. In India, you do go to school 6 days a week rather than 5, as we do here in America. So it was a bit tiring in that aspect. But kind of branching off of that, one thing is that in India, obviously, like here in America, we have like our weekends and like even though they're to hang out and chill, we still do stuff. But for me, at least in my host family, and it sounds like a lot of other host families, all we really did was sleep and eat on Sundays. So it really was kind of just a time to hang out. I played video games, watched we would go to movies on Sunday. So that's what we did. But Hindi class was for 3 to 4 hours every day. And then we would do like cultural activities, usually like dancing, Indian dance, singing, Indian cooking, stuff like that. And we would finish our day with sports. So I was able to play squash, cricket, shooting, all things that I hadn't necessarily played in America. As far as transportation goes, I actually lived on the campus of my school. The school that I went to doesn't host currently, and I think the same two schools are hosting the summer program in indoor at least this year, and those students got to school on a school bus, but I walked home, and after school I would study. Sometimes on weekdays we would go out to the mall. I went to the temple a few times with my host mom and host aunt, and I would play lots of video games with my host brother. So one thing in India is everyone goes to bed pretty late and wakes up pretty early. So I would go to bed 11, 12, 1 and wake up 6:30, which was pretty tiring. But adrenaline pumping, made it so that it really wasn't an issue. And we were more than allowed to take naps after school, so I definitely indulged in that. One cool thing about my host family was an interfaith family. From what I know, that's somewhat rare in India, especially with arranged marriages now becoming less popular. I guess interfaith couples are becoming more popular slowly, but my host dad was a Christian and my host mom was a Hindu. So I'll say that I was like pretty nervous to talk about religion at first, especially to my host family, host brother, but also to my Indian friends that were at my host school. But I feel like even them, like they were super eager to talk to me about my beliefs as a Christian. And this is definitely like in the context of India. So I can't speak for Korea or China or Morocco, but I felt like they were definitely very open, very willing to talk about our differences. It was cool to kind of talk to my host dad about being a Christian in India, and I was able to talk to him about being Christian in America. So that was definitely very interesting. And I wanted to mention I didn't have any previous experience in Hindi. I quit my job like in April before I left because I said, "Oh, I'm gonna study Hindi like all of May and June, and I'm gonna go like conversational." But I ended up not studying any, and I did pretty well on my OPI, so that was very reassuring. One thing that I wanted to talk about also was food. Food was pretty spicy at first, especially the food that we had at school and that our host family made for us. But we got used to it, so it was totally fine. I only ate veggie because my mom was Hindu, so she prescribed to a very, I guess, strict diet, I'll say. But it definitely wouldn't be a problem if you have dietary restrictions. And in fact, I came back to the U.S. and I don't know, I feel like I couldn't stomach American food. It was kind of a component of reverse culture shock that I was feeling because it was just so bland. So that was one thing. What was I going to say? Oh, and one thing I just wanted to mention real quick, which I know is a very sensitive topic, and I can't necessarily give advice in this area, obviously, because I am a guy, but there were 17 people that went to indoor, and we were split between two schools. It was me and 7 other girls at one of the or my school, I guess I should say. So it was just me and 7 other girls, and there were definitely times when one of my host teachers was a guy, and he definitely would kind of hone in on me and like ask me before he would ask the girls. So again, I think India, I mean, I couldn't necessarily say if India as a culture is moving away from misogyny. I would think so, especially in the bigger cities. But just know that is something that's there. I mean, again, I can't really speak because I'm a guy, but I felt safe. And I think all the 7 girls that I was with felt very safe all throughout the program. And then just one last thing I wanted to mention was I was actually advised when I was applying, so right around this time 2 years ago, I was advised, my bad, to not choose Hindi because I was told that It wasn't useful. People in India all speak English, and Indian Americans all speak English, which is true to an extent. But I found that, like especially in India, and then even coming back to America, speaking Hindi with Indian Americans, that they're very enthused when you speak it, because not a lot of Americans would go out of their way to speak Hindi or learn Hindi. So they were very encouraging when I was in India as far as using it, using the language. So yeah, and that's all I have, I think. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, up next is Josephine.
Hi, everybody. My name is Josephine. I am a 2016 Tajikistan alum. I chose Persian because I had some previous experience in Arabic, but I wanted to see the linguistic differences between Arabic and Persian. I also wanted to expand my horizons when it came to language. Persian was my 6th language that I learned, and so I wanted to have a different type of language because some of the other languages that I spoke were romantic languages. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my daily schedule and then the Tajik program. So I would wake up at about 7 every day, and then for safety reasons, we didn't take public transportation. We were driven to class. The Tajikistan program is a little bit different because there's no school that hosts us. We were literally in somebody's big backyard with our 2 teachers, and they would teach us in the backyard in these separate rooms. We would have class for 2 or 3 hours and then go to lunch, and then come back for another hour or 2 of class. And then in the afternoon, we would either do some kind of cultural activity like visiting the city or learning about music or dance, or we would just go home and hang out with our host families. My host family lived a little bit outside of the capital of Tajikistan, which is Dushanbe. And I had a really big family. I had a bunch of siblings, which was really weird for me because I am an only child here in Salt Lake City in Utah. But it was a really interesting program for me because I had no prior experience in Persian and nobody else did either. It's one of the smaller programs, so there were only 11 of us, and that's it. There's no other groups. It's just the 11 of us going into Tajikistan all together, which was really nice because we got to know each other really, really well. I would say the most valuable thing I learned from my experience would probably be how to be an independent person. Like I said, I went when I was 15, so I was the youngest person in my group, and probably in Nestle as a whole, I think you have to be 15 to go. I'm not sure about that. But it really gave me a lot of experience in traveling on my own, and being my own person, making my own decisions, and interacting with a new family on my own. One thing I would note about Tajikistan is that it is a country that still experiences a lot of misogyny. So all of us were told not to leave home without a host family member who was over 18, and that's because there are some problems in Tajikistan with police bribery, especially with foreign visitors. But I would say that is really essential for female students who are going to Tajikistan, because I know some of my male peers were able to go out by themselves into the city and had no problems. But as a female, I think it made me a lot more comfortable to be with my sister, who was in her 20s or 30s, I think. And then I'm going to talk a little bit lastly about what I'm doing with Persian now. So Tajiki is not the most spoken dialect of Persian. The most spoken dialect is Farsi, but that's spoken in Iran, so obviously it'd be really hard to send students to Iran to study there. So we learn Tajiki because they are mutually understandable. So now I'm not really taking any classes in Persian. I'm trying to find colleges that have Persian classes because I'm a senior in high school. But what I've been doing in Salt Lake is I have been volunteering with the refugee center downtown, and there are a lot of Afghan refugees in Salt Lake City, and they speak Dari, which is the third dialect of Persian. And so they're able to understand me when they need something. And we can communicate that way. So that's been really helpful for me for practicing. Yeah, if you have any other questions, oh, here's my cat, thanks, buddy. If you have any other questions about the Persian program, just let me know. I'm happy to answer any other ones.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, next up we have Lucia. So if you want to go.
Sure. I don't think I got the chance to introduce myself earlier. So I'm Lucia. I am currently a sophomore in high school. I was on the 2018 summer Russian program in Chisinau with Sara. And I did have some experience before I went. I went to a Star Talk and I practiced speaking in Russian a little bit with my parents because they're both pretty proficient in the language. But I definitely had difficulties with the language when I got there. My host family, I was just with a single older woman, probably in her mid-60s. She didn't speak any English, and I know a lot of the other host families, someone in the family spoke a little bit of English. My host mom didn't, so there was definitely a little bit more of a struggle with communication there, but we did work it out after a few days. I was also on the younger side of my program, so if anyone has questions about that, I can talk about that. And also, Moldova is, we were told at pre-departure orientation, it's one of the most religiously observant countries in Europe. I'm an atheist, and I'm also gay, so that was a little bit, I was definitely nervous going into that. I had heard a lot about the prevalence of gender roles, and there was definitely a large amount of sexual harassment that we were exposed to, so those were all things that I was kind of nervous about going into. But one of the great things was that everyone else on the program was in a similar situation, so we were always able to talk to anyone else about that, and they always helped us, however strange our problems might have seemed. But one of the things that my host mom and I really bonded over was music. We both loved music, so I remember my first week in Chisinau, she invited me to go to a concert, and we both went for about an hour or two to listen to the National Orchestra play, and it was really amazing, and I met a lot of her friends. So that's something we did several times while I was there. One of the things I loved about Chisinau is there are so many parks. So after class, we had classes from 9 to 1, and then we would have excursions about 3 or 4 days a week for about an hour or two in the afternoon. So sometimes groups of 3 or 4 of us would go sit in a cafe or sit in a park and do our homework and explore different parts of the city. I remember probably my favorite thing that I did there was actually on my last day. About 2 or 3 other students and I walked from school to what is rumored to be the largest Jewish cemetery in Europe, and it was just on the top of this hill, and it was really peaceful, and you could just look out and see the rest of the city, and there was no one else there, and it was just different from anything else I had ever experienced. And it kind of, I guess it made me consider where I was differently, because when you think about it, that's kind of a big historical thing. But when you think about Moldova, history there aren't a lot of things that Moldova is known for. Let's see. Before coming to Moldova, my parents were in the Foreign Service, so I lived abroad for about 8 years. And so I had done a lot of language learning through immersion. That isn't to say I didn't struggle with the language, but I think I was able to maybe adapt to some things definitely more quickly, but other things I definitely struggled in class, and I think that was good for me because languages previously had come more easily to me, and so the chance to really struggle with something, I think that helped me grow a lot as a person. And I don't know, it taught me a lot of study skills, I guess. One of the other things that I mentioned earlier, sexual harassment, we had a disproportionate amount of girls on our program. I want to say it was 14 girls to 6 guys, and about half of us experienced some kind of catcalling, or I think one girl was followed by a guy on her way to the bus stop. Generally, Chisinau was a very safe place, but I think to a certain degree, we all felt very self-conscious about who we were. I want to say we didn't run into more than 5 non-Moldovan people while we were there. And the only other people in the city who spoke English were the Mormon missionaries. So we all definitely bonded very closely with each other. And we really had to use the language a lot to get to where we needed to be and to communicate with anyone outside of our group. So I think that was definitely not unique to the Moldova program, but I think it definitely was a little bit more isolated than some of the other programs I've heard about.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, last up for our presentations is Michael, and then we will go straight into the Q&A and get as much of that done as we can.
Hi, I'm Michael. Like I said, I did the 2017 Morocco program in Rabat. And so going into it, I had like 0 experience in Arabic at all. I like literally didn't know anything. The like post-departure stuff I did, and like I knew that, but like nothing conversationally. And so when I got to Morocco, it was hard with my family because like they only spoke Arabic and a little bit of French, but I persevered and like had a really good time learning Arabic with them, just from like saying like, what's this, which was really a really interesting experience. My host family, I had a host grandmother who actually didn't speak Arabic. She only spoke Amazigh, which is the like indigenous language of Morocco, kind of, which was really interesting because like even a lot of Amazigh people speak Arabic, but she had been raised in a tiny village and then only went to Rabat when her son got older. And then her son, my host father, he was about 60. He spoke Arabic and French. He was a really cool guy. He owned a shop in the Medina. And then I had 2 host brothers. Both of them were 30 or up. One of them was 30. One of them was 32 at the time. And then one of them was married, and that was like my host sister, but like not really. It was his wife. And she was probably like the closest family member. Like we still talk all the time. And yeah, it was a really cool time. But what I like treasure the most about my experience was my host family, because one, like they just like always spoke Arabic to me even when I didn't know what was going on. And if I didn't know what was going on, they'd be like, okay, like you'll see. So I remember that like whenever like my host family was not similar to other host families at all. Everybody had like a fairly like average life. Like their host families lived in an apartment in the suburbs, but my host family lived in the old city, which like doesn't have like air conditioning in the homes. I had a squatty potty in my home, and my like shower was a bucket. And it was like a really old house, and there was only electricity in one part of the house. And it was a really cool experience. And like you'd walk outside and like someone had like slaughtered their meat for the day. So it was just like really interesting, really different from anything I had experienced in America. And then also speaking to like the LGBTQ experience, I never actually came out to anybody on my, or I came out to people in my program, but not in the country, no Moroccans, because it's not really relevant information when you're on a study abroad, especially in countries that tend to be a little bit more heavily homophobic. But also I got the feeling that like my family knew by the end of the program, so it really didn't matter. The thing to keep in mind is that like every single family that signs up for this is open-minded, like they are. They like understand we're Americans, we have different culture. And then that plays into like my next topic of discussion. Being Hindu in Morocco was really interesting because I didn't obviously practice very much because there's like only a handful of Indians in Morocco, let alone Rabat. But I had a lot of interesting conversations with my Moroccan host family because I come from a family in America that's made up of Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and atheists. So like it was kind of like that. My family like is kind of like split religiously. So I had a lot of interesting conversations with them, and like we found out like our relationship with God was like very similar and just like deep stuff like that, which was really interesting to discuss. And I think every single Nestle host family like has that mentality. We're all connected. We all like are here for the greater good. We're all trying to globalize our world and everything, which is a really cool experience. And I think like my host family was very religious, and like even if they're very religious, they're still going to be open-minded. So I don't think you have to worry about that. And then also I wanted to talk about like a little bit about my post program. So in Morocco, I met two guys from West Africa, from Sierra Leone, or three guys from Sierra Leone, Cameroon, and Liberia. And currently I'm raising money for scholarship programs for them to help K through 12 girls in their countries get education so that they can be taken out of bad situations where they can be sold into child marriage or human trafficking or taken advantage of in general. And the relationships you make with people in your host country like are amazing for things you'll do in the United States. I've raised, I think, over $600 just a few times we've done like little events for them, which has helped enormously with their scholarships. And it's like a really rewarding experience for all of us. So yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Now I will turn the time over to Aurelia for a couple questions, and the webinar will run till 6:05 at the extreme latest. And if you guys have any unanswered questions, we're going to leave the names of the people who presented us here in the description box, so that way you guys can ask us questions. Find us on Facebook if you want to ask us any specific questions. Right off the bat, I think Aurelia might be having technical difficulties again. So Aurelia, are you there? Okay, so I'll start right off the bat because we have a couple from the YouTube chat. One that we got asked was talking about dating people on Nestle and how some of that works. So we want to talk about that really briefly.
Am I back?
Yeah. We're asking here, actually, I can talk about it. So with regards to dating on Nestle, we had 2 American students date on our program, which was really funny. But the one thing to be aware of, I guess, with dating is it's not just going to happen because you're studying abroad. I mean, it does happen, but it's not like something that absolutely happens 110% of the time. And the other thing is like realizing that it's hard to maintain a long distance relationship, and especially for the summer program, it's only 6 weeks. And so just, I guess, at least for me, it happened. We had 2 people, we're in a couple, but it's not the most like common. And it's kind of difficult to navigate.
Okay, so this question is okay, this question is for the LGBTQ alumni. Did Nestle provide any materials for you guys before program, or how did they support you while on program?
I can talk about that really quick. They gave us they had an alumni panel at our pre-departure orientation, and one of the members of the panel talked about just diversity in Moldova and Estonia. And one of the things they said is other people on your program will support you, but it's, especially in Moldova, it's not well received, so you need to be careful about how you go about it. And I think that's very true. I told my resident director during our individual meeting because it came up in context, and the first thing he asked me after I said that was, have you told anyone outside of the program? And I said no, and he said you should like under no circumstance do that. So I think it depends on where you are. For me, I knew going in that what I was just not going to be able to really talk about it with locals unless it was a really odd situation. I think it really helped that there were other people on my program who I could talk to and who supported me. And the resident director was definitely gave me advice on, like, he talked about what past students had told him and the general feedback they had given him after completing the program, which helped that it was definitely still a struggle because you couldn't talk to anyone outside the program about it.
Also, I don't know about the other places, but the other thing that we sort of went over at pre-departure orientation that was like vaguely related, and that I was talking about with someone the other day actually, was like, in a lot of Eastern European cultures, people are really invested in like your personal life and specifically your love life. Like my host mom definitely asked me if I had a boyfriend. So we just talked about like how to answer questions like that, which is something to think about.
Technical difficulties again. We'll give Aurelia.
Okay, what was the best part of your NSLI experience?
Okay, do we want to have like two people take it?
Yeah. So okay,
I can
go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so part of the NSLI program, or at least for the Korean program, is a overnight trip. And what happened was with our host school, they also had an overnight trip during their summer break called the English camp, in which they would practice their English. So they combined those two things. So we had a 3-day trip with around like 30 Korean students. And honestly, that was the best part of the NSLI program for me. Like, we made so many like bonds and memories, and some of my best memories come from that 3-day trip. Like, at one point we went cliff diving, and like we also had like a lot of really good discussions, and we got to experience a lot of like traditional Korean games, and like it was just a really good experience overall. Like, I don't know how to like word this properly, but like being with the students, we got to see like their perspective of the American culture, and we got to share how it actually was versus their perception of it. And they did the same to us with the Korean school and culture, which was a really good experience. And I treasure that all those memories that I made during that. So, yeah.
I can answer that question too. I would say the best part of my NSLI experience was just like being integrated into my host family's life, because like I said, I'm an only child here in Utah, and I had like 5 like little kids running around at the same time in my host house, because I had like multiple older siblings who had their kids living with us. So when one of my host siblings turned 18, I was there for his birthday party. I was there during Ramadan, so we celebrated Eid together. And when I got back from my overnight stay, my like little 2-year-old host brother like ran up and gave me a huge hug, even though he like I'd only been gone for like 30 hours, I think, but he was like so excited to see me come back. And like I've never experienced that before as an only child, and so that was a really like meaningful experience for me, and also just like staying in touch with my host family afterwards and knowing that I still have that connection even if I'm not living there anymore.
Okay, and then we're going to have one last question, which Aurelia will ask in just a moment, and then we will close the webinar up.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me? Okay, so does anyone have any tips for the application in general? And like, why do you think you got in? What do you think helped you? So
I can answer that.
Brief.
You want, yeah, really briefly. So for me, my like biggest application tip is just like be yourself, but also like show that you are really invested in learning the language and that you have like a career path, that you have an idea of how you want to use the language outside of your NSLI experience. So I know my already told me that like a big thing they look for is that they want to invest in people. So they want to invest in people who are continue using their language after their NSLI program and continue doing it for good. So I would just say like show that you want this, show that you're like mature, and then show that you have like plans for using language afterwards.
One thing I would add to that is just like be yourself in your application. Like don't be so afraid of like trying to be exactly what the NSLI application committee, what you think that they want, and be focused on being like your authentic self, because they're going to be reading your application and they're going to be judging you based off of that application. And so it's really important, and this was something that was really important to me, was like being genuine in my application and like making sure that I shone through and I wasn't just trying to put up this facade to try to get in, I guess.
Yeah, one super quick thing that reminded me of too was that I know a lot of people who are interested in NSLI-Y are people who are interested in going into like national security and diplomacy. But if that is not a career path you're interested in pursuing, let that hold you back from the application. Like I, at the time, wanted to go into education and talked about like how studying abroad and studying Russian related to that. And there are like people with a lot of diverse interests who do the program. It's not just people who want to work in foreign service.
Yeah, kind of speaking to that too. So I'm actually an applicant this year for Hindi academic year, and I was a Hindi or a Arabic alumni. I chose Arabic because I thought it'd be really useful with French and Spanish, which it is. And I have no regrets picking Arabic summer. But I kind of realized that my passion lies with like Indian culture, Hinduism, policy in India, stuff like that, more than it does in Arabic speaking countries or in Muslim majority countries. So choose what, like, this is gonna sound so cheesy, but choose what your heart wants and not what your like head wants, because like ultimately you're going to follow through with what you actually like want deep in your soul. But that's not to say I'm like gonna quit Arabic. Like I am still learning Arabic as well as Hindi. So just like choose what you want to do, and if you want to do two, just like do whatever speaks more to you.
A little bit to that, I definitely say just go with what, it's not necessary, go with what you think you want to do. I know I've studied Chinese, I started studying Chinese when I was
Aurelia, I think we're losing you again. This is story of the life. Let's see. Well, I know Aurelia. She studied Chinese for like all of when she was younger, which is super, 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 super cool. There you are. Okay, you're back. I told them you studied Chinese for your whole life because you're amazing. Oh, she's gone. But kind of what Aurelia was saying, like I said, I know her a little bit, and one thing that was for her, she applied last year and was
okay. Yeah, I studied Chinese.
You applied and were rejected from Chinese, right?
Yeah. And then I realized when I saw that Bahasa Indonesian was the answer, I was just not the answer, but was an option. I was so happy. And while it was still hard to choose between the two, I realized that I'm more interested in Southeast Asia, and just like Indonesia is such a large country, and that it can actually help me with more languages because it's so connected to all the languages, such as like Arabic and Spanish. So it was really interesting linguistically as well. So yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you guys. So that is the end of the webinar. We are out of time, unfortunately. But like we had said on the YouTube chat, for those of you who are on there, we put the names of all the presenters in the description, so you guys can contact them on Facebook, any of us, with any additional questions you might have, because we know that time is short. And yeah, thank you guys all for coming out, and a huge thank you to our presenters. You're amazing.
We couldn't do this without you guys, so.
Yeah, thank you guys. And this video will be available at this link for however long, just as long as it's here. Okay, thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.